So they've got, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And so it's got intelligent transportation systems for a range of clients, including transportation agencies, governments like the city of Riverside, and commercial entities. Prior to becoming the CEO for HMI Technologies, Dean led HMI Technologies in Australia from 2015 to 2017. And when you hear him, you'll understand why. Successfully establishing HMI Technologies as a challenger, securing major projects for the company and expanding its operations, opening offices in 3 states. Dean has a strong reputation in the industry in Australia and also globally. In 2017, Dean became president of ITS Australia after several years as vice president and project director for its highly successful World Congress in Melbourne. For Ohmio, the city of Riverside aims to become a hotspot for innovation by teaming up with Ohmio, and the plan is to have them set up its international headquarters and a cutting-edge manufacturing hub in Riverside. The move recently got the green light with a vote from the city council, and I think Dean is just waiting for the final finishing touches until it becomes official. The goal will be to bring groundbreaking electric autonomous vehicles to the US and Riverside, creating jobs and boosting research in the area. So without further ado, please welcome Dean to our course.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for that kind introduction. And thank you, everybody, for giving me the opportunity to present to you today from a long distance away and from a significant time difference away. Let's hope that the technology works and my screen sharing can now come up and we can work through this presentation together. You can see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Just as a...
Dean, do you want to put it in the presentation mode? Yeah. Right at the there? Yeah, there you go.
Just as a further introduction, whilst I've been with HMI now for close to 9 years, I spent a huge majority of my working career working in government. I worked for 31 years in the state road agency, transport agency here in Melbourne, which is equivalent to one of your state DOTs, where I spent many years in a variety of capacities, the last 15 years of which I was Director of Road Operations and responsible for all of our ITS operations. So a little bit of background as to where we've come from and where we are. As Jay has mentioned, I represent Ohmio and HMI. HMI is the original company, which was formed over 20 years ago. It has focused on the development, design, manufacture of a huge number of electronic signage for freeways, motorways. As you can see there, quite a number of examples. Here in Australia and New Zealand, we operate what we call managed motorways. So every mile or half mile, we have electronic speed limits over each lane. We have variable speed, variable message signs. We have travel time systems. We have enforcement. We have dynamic ramp metering. HMI has been involved in that for over 20 years, both in Australia and New Zealand. I set up the company in Australia in 2015. The Ohmio name, as you can see from the screen there, is HMI with an O at each end. And the O actually represents a wheel. So we've anecdotally called it HMI on wheels, which led to the development of the autonomous vehicle that we'll be talking about for the rest of the presentation. So my next screen is headed our evolution as an AV supplier. I hope you can see that as well. Yeah? Yep. Yes. All right, so the journey of Ohmio, as opposed to HMI, commenced in 2017 when we decided as a company that in the future, drivers driving cars will not be being communicated to by a variable message sign, because they won't be driving the car anymore, but a variable message sign will actually be communicating with a driverless vehicle. So we felt that we needed to bring driverless vehicles into the game And originally, we actually purchased 3 French-made vehicles. We purchased them at a fairly high sum of money. We delivered them to New Zealand and Australia. We showcased them to the Australian and New Zealand governments. And at the end of the day, we were a little bit disappointed with them because the manufacturer that we purchased them from wasn't interested in further developing the vehicles. They were just interested in selling us the vehicles as they were and operating them. We wanted to, because we were an ITS, an electronics company, we wanted to take them to another level, to expand their capabilities, to get them to communicate with infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. But because we weren't able to get into the electronics of those vehicles, the company who sold them to us wouldn't let us. We eventually said, well, I think we can build these vehicles ourselves. And that's why in September 2017, we launched Ohmio. And since then, we've gone through a progression, which I'll go through in the subsequent slides. Just quickly, who we are. Mohammed Hikmet is our chairman, the executive chairman. Rosabel has met Mohammed. He's been to Riverside a number of times with me and will be there again in a few weeks' time. We now have got a director of business development in the US, a gentleman called Zain Mashat, who lives just outside of San Francisco. We have a director in Europe, Robert Sikora, a director in the UK, Ian Pulford, a German-born chief technical officer, Harp Beinken, who resides in Auckland, a head of research and development, Mahmoud Hikmet, and a number of other directors in Australia, as well as a strategic advisor in Martin Matthews, who had a very, very long career in government in New Zealand. So this slide just quickly shows you that we did AV trials with EV vehicles, shuttles, way back in 2015-16 in Sydney, Melbourne, and Christchurch. They were the ones where I said we wanted to introduce them to government, but we weren't satisfied with how we were allowed to operate them, which led to the development of Ohmio itself. This slide here just quickly shows you a summary that I did at last year's World Congress in Los Angeles of where there are trials being undertaken around the world using autonomous electric shuttles. Now, I emphasize that because we're in the shuttle game where we're certainly not trying to compete with Tesla or Waymo or any of the GM Cruisers or any of those. We're specifically looking at slower speed, multi-person, multi-passenger, slow speed shuttles, electric, of course. And this slide shows the variety of projects utilizing those types of vehicles all over the world, whether it be in Asia, Australia, Europe, the Middle East, or America. There's quite a number of small trials happening, but we're getting to the point now where it's enough of trials. They've been proven over probably 5 or 6 years that the technology works. There are other things at play that are perhaps holding us back from moving forward, and I'll try and explain that in a moment. Some of the issues that we feel are different with our vehicles compared to our product, compared to some of our competitors, is that unlike the 3 vehicles that we originally purchased, that manufacturer focused only on the vehicle. They said, there's the vehicle, that's how it operates, away you go, call us if you got any problems. We believe as a manufacturer that the system that we're working in, the ecosystem that we're working in, consists of the vehicle, which has a certain percentage of value associated with it. We said, let's call it 40% for the sake of the argument. But there's surrounding infrastructure, roadside infrastructure, digital infrastructure, satellites, GPS, etc. That accounts for a lot of the ecosystem. And there's the management of both the infrastructure and the vehicle, whether it be people management or whether it be system management. That is the entire ecosystem, not just the vehicle. This slide just quickly shows you the humble beginnings that we came from. 3 simple golf carts that had been converted to be autonomous. This is way back in 2017 near one of our facilities in Auckland. And then, right then, we were already demonstrating that we not only converted a golf cart to be an autonomous golf cart, but we're operating 3 of them in a platoon. Those 3 vehicles, all of them are communicating with each other. So if the lead vehicle slows down, the second vehicle slows down accordingly, and likewise the third vehicle. At this point where they get back to their starting position, they break off platoon and go back to their original starting position. So this was very early days, but we were really proud of what we could do with very little, very early. These were the shuttles that we demonstrated publicly in 2017. They were effectively the previous 3 shuttles that you saw, but with a nicer sort of body associated with them, a little bit of color, carrying some kids, some parents at a convention center in Christchurch. We delivered our very first vehicle, a 3D printed vehicle, in fact, which was a little bit of a gimmick, to Christchurch International Airport in 2019. That's it there. When I say it was a gimmick, it was 3D printed, of course. So people were as much interested in the 3D printing as they were in the fact that it was an electric autonomous vehicle. So it got a lot of publicity. I say it was a gimmick because that was the first and last one that we did in that way. We believe it's the biggest 3D printed vehicle ever made, but it had some downside. And the 2 downsides were that A, the body material was almost an inch thick. And as a result of that, the body weight itself was way, way too heavy. It was just not cost effective, but it was valuable from the point of view of showcasing what we could do. We then built another body to incorporate the wishes of a telecommunications company in Auckland in New Zealand, a company called Spark. They wanted something really high-tech, very modern, very futuristic. So they came up with a bit of a design which we created, which is almost like a Darth Vader helmet, as you can see there. They were very keen on trialing 5G. This was way back in 2019, and we succeeded in doing that with them in Auckland, New Zealand. Our first production vehicle, which is the one you see there, was actually sold to South Korea, just outside of Seoul, a city called Sejong. We sold that, and they were delivered, and they were commissioned, and they were deployed over Zoom throughout COVID. The first vehicle actually arrived in South Korea in April 2020, when the whole Western world was completely locked down. So we had a fair bit of pride with this, because not only did we have a new product, but it was being commissioned and deployed during COVID. And we were doing all the commissioning over Zoom. So we had engineers in Auckland in Australia communicating with engineers in Seoul in South Korea, where English wasn't the Koreans' first language, of course, and a few of our engineers, it wasn't their first language either. So it was a challenge. And the first time I actually got to see this vehicle was in January 2022, when we finally came out of COVID. So there were about 8 or 9 of these vehicles on the streets of Sejong and Gangneung. Our key players and partners in that project have been the Lotte Data Communications Company. Lotte is a very, very big corporation in Korea, the Korean Transport Institute, and KTEC, which is another technical organization in Korea, been very good friends of ours, and they've actually worked with us as partners in that they've pushed the boundaries and the limits and improved the vehicle no end since we delivered them. One of the key learnings out of this particular project, which was our first deployment, as I said, was that we delivered vehicles that had been built in China to a specification that we had provided to our people in China. When they arrived in Korea, the Koreans said to us, "These are fine, they work well, but we need to get them certified to Korean standards." So as a result, a number of components had to be swapped out and changed to meet the requirements of Korea. Some simple things like you could not have a symmetrical front and back of the vehicle. The Korean authorities need to discern between the difference between the front and the back, even though they are symmetrical. So the lighting arrangements had to be changed. The wheel diameter had to be slightly larger to meet Korean standards, etc., etc. The windows had to be tempered glass and various other forms of glass, depending on whether it was the front or the back of the vehicle. This is a very simple demonstration that we did in Auckland in 2021, again during COVID, but we had an opening in shutdowns whereby we were able to run this vehicle in a new residential estate in South Auckland. Again, quite pleased with this. The intention there is to run our vehicles in a residential estate, possibly similar to what we might be doing in Riverside. That project has been held back a little bit because the intention was to run passengers from their houses to the nearby train station. Unfortunately, with a lot of developments, as you probably know in America as well, developers build developments and then the authorities come along with the infrastructure like train stations a few years later, and that's where we're at now. There is no train station yet. This is another piece of work that we did in Sydney in 2022 with a grant from the Australian federal government to test 5G capabilities. But in addition to that, we worked with the university, or La Trobe University, which is based in Melbourne, but was up there in Sydney, to test the acceptance of our vehicle by people with disabilities. So I'll let this run for a couple of minutes.
Shuttle is designed to drive itself using very accurate positioning from directed GPS and using sensors like LiDAR sensors to identify any objects that are in the path of the vehicle.
The bus has a ramp. We can get on the bus.
I thought that's pretty cool, bit sci-fi-ish.
We grew up thinking about one day maybe that'll happen, but it all seems a bit futuristic.
You don't think that this sort of stuff's actually being produced now?
Some of the most important users of these types of transport are the people with various disability types and the elderly.
People don't realize that bus drivers actually do a lot, and it's all these human factors that if you take the driver out, you need to come up with a solution.
So we really need to understand how people like that are going to use these vehicles and understand the challenges that they're going to face.
I know this could be beneficial for me, but not knowing how safe it would be for me.
And whether there's enough room for ambulant people and people in wheelchairs.
So I had some concerns about how easy it would be to get on and off.
It's going to be easy to find the door, and if the bus is going to stop,
because the bus is so quiet, it can potentially face a problem for visually impaired people.
My main thing is looking at the app and seeing how well it works and how easy I'd be able to access it. See, I'm legally blind, so I'd need a screen reader, be able to do it by voice.
So thanks for coming. We'd like to know what is your experience of this vehicle? What do you think about the concept? How do you feel? How do you feel using it? Do you feel comfortable? This will be an app, and not everybody will have access to it, only people with disability who need it.
So by clicking this button, we can choose the destination.
I found that the app was quite straightforward and simple to use. You could actually choose how long the door would stay open for.
The door is closing now.
It would allow enough time for you to get into the bus and find a seat.
I can feel in control.
Made me feel like I was in control. Definitely the use of the voice to control the app.
Having a system that I can control and manage myself is great. That's probably my most frustrating part of disability, having to rely on other people.
All of these functionalities already is in the screen as well. Here we have the map and the position of the bus at the moment.
So getting on and off this driverless bus, it doesn't concern me any more than getting on and off a regular bus.
Getting on there, I seem to feel comfortable. I almost forgot that there was no driver.
Absolutely amazing concept, as in you can feel secure in it. You can work out easily how to use the app, and you can feel comfortable in the vehicle knowing that it's also going to stop if it needs to stop. Sophie found it quite comfortable. She enjoyed, just sitting in it. And it had quite enough room, which was good.
Yeah, it was very smooth. I know, especially normal buses, it can get a bit rocky.
People with disability, elderly, and so forth can hop on one of these outside their house and take some to some mass transit, such as a bus station or interchange or a railway station.
So something like this would be really beneficial for me because I could drive to a fixed point and then get myself around the city.
I think it's a great idea. I think it'll work very well in areas like here at Sydney Olympic Park. I think it'll work well in airports and areas where there are structured road layouts.
Just in the last year or so, people are actually starting to see how they'll provide real viable transport services. So the future is looking really good for these types of vehicles at the moment.
To everybody that's involved in this, whether it be the designers of these shuttles, the researchers, like, keep doing it. All challenges can be overcome, and I think that the more consultation we do with people that'll be using this type of technology will only greatly benefit the end product and make sure that it's a safe mode of transport for everyone.
Yeah, so we're quite pleased with the outcome of that trial. As you saw, the participants were a little bit reticent early, but as they went through it all, they managed to come to grips with what they were riding on, and were quite pleased with the service it could provide to them, obviously people with disabilities. Next couple of trials that I'll describe: Queenstown in New Zealand, beautiful place in the world. If you ever get a chance to come there, we showcased a vehicle there earlier this year. And more importantly, our JFK Airport trial, which we did phase 1 of in June of this year, and we're waiting on NHTSA to give us approval to start phase 2. This involved working with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, where we delivered 3 vehicles. They're still there at JFK. 3 vehicles. They set us a target of operating those vehicles at 23 miles per hour and at a separation of 6 feet, which was a little bit of a challenge. But not only that, they allowed us to use a short strip of straight road, which you'll see in the video in a moment, that was only barely 700 foot long. And at the end of the 700 foot was a concrete barrier. So we had to make sure that the vehicles did stop in time, otherwise we'd be going through concrete. Fortunately, all went well, and we're extremely pleased with how the trial went, so much so that Port Authority of New York wants us to stay there longer. So this is the video showing the vehicles on that extremely short stretch of road. So the key learnings from this project, like we had with the Korean one, is that Korea, we ticked all the boxes. When we get to America, there's a whole heap of new boxes to be ticked. And when we get to Europe, again, there's another bunch of new boxes to be ticked. So there are no real standards across the world in terms of what the authorities require in their countries. Every market is a new market. And in fact, in America, potentially every state is a new state where different requirements are needing to be met. So the NHTSA approval is the very high level, broad federal government requirement that unless you pass their approval, don't bother talking to anyone else. We obviously received that for JFK, and we're very close to receiving the second one for the second stage. And likewise, when we come to Riverside, we'll be needing a subsequent separate NHTSA approval for each use case that we go into, which makes life interesting. Let's move on. We've subsequently also had deployments in Europe, in Luxembourg, in Amsterdam. There's a vehicle on its way to Finland now, which will be operated at minus 40 degrees Celsius when it gets there. And also we have vehicles at Milton Keynes in the UK. Again, key learning: homologation or meeting certification. Europe is made up of 27 countries, and UK is an additional country to that. So potentially we could be looking at 28 different sets of standardization requirements. We're hoping that we won't have to do that in each and every case, but potentially we will. And then we come to Riverside. As you probably all saw, in early September, 6th of September in particular, I was in Riverside. We met with the City Council. They gave an in-principle agreement for us to set up manufacturing in Riverside, as well as providing 3 vehicles for a project for a duration of 2 years. That decision is nearing conclusion. As I said, I will be in Riverside in 2 weeks' time when we have our subsequent meeting with council. Since that time, we've drawn up all the contracts. The city lawyers are all happy with those. If council gives its subsequent tick, we'll be ready to go. So what makes us different? We believe that the vehicle that we provide is modular, it's scalable, and it's reliable, and we work with our partners, which is a little bit unlike what our competitors do. So our modular design is first of all, an open architecture, open interface, modular design, as I said. So various components of how the vehicle works, various systems within the vehicle have been designed so that they work, I suppose, independently of each other if they need to, and they work dependently on each other where necessary. But the important thing is that we can swap out and swap in various systems if we need to, if the customer requires. All the electronics in the vehicle are effectively in the floor. We originally used to call this the flying carpet. The rest of the vehicle up above is simply just a shell. And the next video demonstrates what we mean by it being a shell. You can have any form of shell on top of the platform. Here you've got a container transport at an airport. Here you've got a street sweeper. The next one potentially is a snow plow, and then back to being a person carrying shuttle. So the knowledge or the electronics of the vehicle is what's important. The actual shuttle can be anything that the customer wants. So what differentiates us? This is a key factor. Because we've been an ITS manufacturing company for a long time, we look at the problem from the point of view of delivering a solution to a problem rather than just deploying products. As I said before, we work on the ecosystem. We look at it as a vehicle, a piece of infrastructure as well, be it roadside or otherwise, and management of both. We look at the point of view that the end user is the passenger, so the customer has to be satisfied. The customer has to, I suppose, trust the equipment that they're getting into. We partner with our stakeholders. That's extremely important. We take a collaborative approach with our clients, and we are adaptable and scalable to needs. We don't just come in and say, this is what we sell, this is what you get. We're amenable to changing things. And this, for instance, is another design that we've been looking at, which would enable our vehicle to be twice as big. It's articulated, so it's got the bendy bit in the middle, but potentially that could be a platooning solution, as I showed before with the JFK vehicles. Or you could have two of these vehicles platooning. That way it gives you 4 times the capacity. But we're open. We're not an organisation that's got 50 of our Ohmio vehicles sitting in a car park somewhere waiting to be sold. We look at everything as a project, and every project is a different project from the one before. I think that's about it. Jay, I think if you're happy with that.
Yes, very good. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing new technology. And you even hit some of the points I was going to be asking you about, so we'll revisit that.
Yep.
First, though, I'd like to hear if any students have any questions or comments for Dean before I hog the stage. Yes, Sumi, go ahead. And then Ben, and then Reina.
Hello, Dean. Good evening. So that was a very wonderful presentation. Thank you for that. So I wanted to give a little background about me. So in my strategy management course, I was doing a project on Neuro, which also deals in autonomous electric vehicles. So I'm pretty much aware about this field. And so my question was, while I was searching about Neuro, we came to a conclusion that each vehicle was generating petabytes of data, so that petabyte is like way too much server can handle. So each vehicle with this LiDAR and radar and other sensors were generating petabytes of data over the day. So does Ohmio face the same problem? And if so, who handles the data structure?
Well, thank you for the question, Sumi. I'm not quite sure in terms of the actual size of the data. You probably know better than I do, but we collect a lot of data. I wouldn't say it's petabytes, it might be terabytes, but we do collect all the data. It goes back to a server in the cloud, and particularly with our friends in Korea, where we've been working with them for close to 3 years now. they've been gaining access to all of our data all of the time, speed, direction, heading, braking, battery life, battery capacity, etc. There's a lot of data there. And it hasn't been a problem for us to date that I'm aware of, that it's generating too much data or data that we cannot manage. So I don't think that's a problem from our point of view.
Sorry, Dean, maybe I paraphrased my question wrong, but my question was like, since Neuro is generating petabytes of data, they are using that same data to train their system, autonomous electric vehicle driving, so that they can communicate with other cars and there is no human interaction involved. So is Ohmio training their vehicles in the same way? Like let's say, for example, you mentioned terabytes. So if one particular vehicle is generating terabytes of data, is it going back to the system at Ohmio and it is being used to run regressions and like simulations to retrain that vehicle to perform better?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, I did not get your question correctly. Yes, you're right. Yes, we are learning as we are progressing, of course. All the data that we're receiving ends up making our vehicle better as we keep on developing. Yes.
Okay, thank you for answering that, Dean. And one last question, sorry. So sorry for taking up so much time. So I don't think you mentioned about regenerative braking. So is it used in Ohmio vehicles?
I'm not sure. I'm not a technical expert. Perhaps we can discuss that when we get to Riverside in a few weeks' time, if you'd like to catch up with us.
Oh, for sure. I would love that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean. Go ahead, Ben.
Thanks, Dean. Very interesting presentation, and watching those first golf carts do their maiden run. I don't know if it was their maiden run, but that was really cool to see.
Yeah.
A little uncanny almost. And I started to wonder, I imagine when you have a platoon like that, there are many ways in which the system needs to be more complex than for just one vehicle. But
Yeah.
I'm also wondering if there's some ways it simplifies things to have multiple vehicles sensing what's going on.
Yeah, well, they're all sensing, obviously. Just by way of introduction, each of those vehicles that you saw has got 6 LiDARs, 3 on the front, 3 on the back. Ultimately, we'll have cameras both inside and outside as well. It's got other sensors in the bumper bars of the vehicles, etc. So particularly those platooning vehicles that you saw at JFK, we had to make a decision on how we were going to operate that platoon, because we're in a very short stretch, 700 feet. You build up to speed to 23 miles per hour and you virtually have to start slowing down, otherwise you're going to hit something. So we had to decide whether, if the front vehicle brakes, do they all brake simultaneously and sort of hopefully they all stop in the same spot, or do we do something different? And so with that platooning trial that we did at JFK, we said if the front vehicle detects an obstacle, it will send a message to the back vehicle, and that back vehicle will break off. It'll send a message to the second vehicle and it'll break off. So effectively they're braking in reverse. The back and the second vehicle were braking harder and disconnecting, and then the front vehicle was stopping. But it was a vehicle-to-vehicle technology in a way, but still early days. I don't think anybody has nutted out this completely yet, but we're certainly involved in it.
Some collaborative operations among vehicles. It sounds fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Raina.
Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Raina. I'm in stochastic route planning for electric vehicles. My partner is Sumi. He was just talking to you.
Yeah.
So my question is about Ohmio's vehicles. Like, are they meant to go on specific paths, or are they smart enough to drive according to traffic?
Yeah, very good question. Very good question. And it gets back to a couple of the questions that I think Jay was going to ask me, but we're sort of answering them as we go along. We are in no way, shape or form trying to compete with passenger vehicle, autonomous vehicles. So we're not out there saying that our vehicles drive on every street and pick you up and take you everywhere like some of the OEMs, the top tier OEMs are stating they can do. The shuttles that you saw in my presentation and the equivalent shuttles from our competitors are designed to operate on predetermined routes. So the first thing we'll do when we get to Riverside, the first thing we did when we did any of the other deployments is to ask our customer, where would you like these vehicles to go? What is the route? And then we embed that route into the entire system. So the vehicle will operate that route time and time and time again to the point where you can almost see the grooves in the road, but they're not as yet designed to go everywhere all the time for everybody.
Awesome. Well, I was wondering if you could give us like a little hint of what the project is going to be for Riverside. Like, is it going to be a shuttle, or I thought like, you know, the I think it was a street cleaner. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. No, they're going to be shuttles, and we've been speaking to the city management as well as Rosabelle and Rodolfo about a suite of potential use cases. The intention is that we will build 3 vehicles, and those 3 vehicles will be being operated in Riverside for at least 2 years. So the project duration will be 2 years. The city has got some ideas on where they would like to deploy them. They're picking particular streets that they'd like to run them on. But I'm sure Rosabelle and Rodolfo have got some ideas as well on running the vehicles within the university campus at some stage or other. So we won't necessarily just be in one place. We could potentially do 8 3-month projects, if you know what I mean.
Okay, awesome. Well, UCR has some great technology for electric vehicles, so you know, just so you know.
No problem.
And that's all I have. Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you.
And we have team members from the EcoCar project in this class. Maybe you can identify yourself, Chan, and say hi.
Hi, my name is Chan. Part of EcoCar project. I don't work in the like car designing and engineering part, but work for the diversity and equity part of the team. But yes, nice to meet you. Awesome project.
Good to meet you too. Nab, you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Dean. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It was lovely. And second, I just have one question. So when you're coming to Riverside or in many places in USA, are you also planning to like have the public transportation facilities where we can connect with Ohmio? Are you considering that? What do you think about this? I would like to know.
Yes. Look, effectively, as I've just mentioned, these vehicles are being focused as sort of a public transport vehicle. They're in many ways catering for first mile, last mile type transport. I know in the US, probably public transit isn't such a big deal. Most people drive cars, but in many places in Australia, I live in a city here, Melbourne, which has got the biggest tram network in the world. But we also have buses, and we also have new residential estates where the bus lines and the tram lines haven't been incorporated yet. So you've got people living there who've got a choice of either driving their car to work or to play or whatever, or walking a fair distance to get to a tram stop, or alternatively, we could deploy Ohmio shuttles to be that first mile, last mile piece of the jigsaw puzzle in the transportation equation. So that would be one deployment. The other deployments, as you've seen, airports are a fantastic use case. Airports have got massive car parks that link up to terminals. Universities are a huge use case. Many students on a big campus. So a shuttle service would be great there. And then in smaller type cities, I'm not necessarily saying we're going to deploy these in New York tomorrow, but in a smaller city like Riverside, it's a perfect situation in the right location.
Thank you so much. But I have another thing actually, sorry. And when you said that in US, it's not a problem when people generally drive cars. So I have that perspective when I came here, that people have to learn cars because they don't have the option, not because they learn cars and then they don't need transportation. Like,
Yeah,
that was my perspective of it, actually.
yeah.
But thank you.
I think in future there's going to be less and less people driving cars, basically. Yeah. Who have I got here? Scott.
Scott, and then Shan, and then either myself or Roosevelt.
Hi, Dean. Thanks for the presentation. And we're definitely looking forward. I'm one of the entrepreneurs in residence on Roosevelt's team. I focus on helping the startups that we mentor raise venture capital. I had a couple, I think we're focused this week on competition for the startups, for the projects and startups here in the class. I was just curious. Obviously there's some startups that have raised a tremendous amount of capital in your space, and I don't know what your competitive matrix looks like in your pitch deck, but like Zoox, for example, I think Amazon acquired them for something like $1 billion. I don't know if you would consider them a direct competitor. But I guess my question is, as you're trying to decide where to go in the world to deploy your vehicles, how do you take on that decision? Because, for example, if there's a well-funded startup or competitor in a country, would you tend to shy away from that country, or would you go head to head? Would you stay out of Europe because of startups like Easy Mile or others? Like, how do you think about your beachhead markets and geographies, just for those entrepreneurs on this call who are trying to decide where to start out?
Yeah. Good question, Scott. Very good question. But firstly, let me say this. The advantage that we've had is that we have been an existing company. As I said, HMI has been in operation since around about 2000. So we had an established existing business, not a huge business, talking less than $20 million per annum, deploying sites. All of the revenue, all of the profits that we've received through that business for the past 6 or 7 years has gone into the development of Ohmio. We are completely owned by one person, and that is Mohammed Hikmet, who you saw in one of my slides. He's the sole shareholder. We have not had 1 cent of external funding in terms of partnerships. We've done some deals in different places where, for instance, in China, we set up a joint venture there that for every dollar that we put in, they would put in. That started at the start of COVID, so that really didn't go too well, given that the world was shut down. Nobody could get into China. We virtually could do nothing. So out of what was potentially a $20 million joint venture, the two organizations, the Chinese people and ourselves, probably spent $300,000 in total. But let me now get back to our competitors. You brought up an interesting one, Easy Mile and equally Navia, who came out at about the same time. Both of them have had significant amount of investment funding. Navia haven't fared too well despite the investment funding that they've received. Easy Mile, I'm not too sure how they're going. Another competitor of ours would have been the Ollie vehicle out of Arizona, out of Local Motors. They had a significant amount of funding, but they focused more on what the vehicle looked like rather than how the vehicle operated. So they weren't developing their own drive system. They were getting third parties, Perrone Robotics and others from around the United States to provide them the drive system, and they varied from one to the other. So having investment funding doesn't necessarily mean you're going to succeed. We think that the way we've done it, where we have complete control of our destiny and we have complete control of our funding, enables us to be more flexible and to make the decisions that we want to make fairly quickly between 1 or 2 people. We don't have to seek external shareholders' opinions on anything. We just say yes or no whether we want to do it. When it comes to the markets, we operate in a particular part of the world, Australia and New Zealand, that many people have never even been to, and is such a long, long way away from anywhere else that nobody really cares about coming to. However, what we've identified, obviously, is that there are at least 2 huge markets in the world. They are the US and Europe, to a lesser extent, the other parts of Asia. So we focus less on our own backyard because we know we're not going to make too much money in our own backyard. They're just not interested. But the Europeans are throwing a hell of a lot of money at autonomy. In fact, last week, or perhaps even the week before, they introduced a new bill in the EU and also in the UK that they're really pushing forward with autonomy in a big way. They're supporting it big time, maybe not as much as the US is at the moment. So we found that a couple of our competitors, the two that I mentioned earlier, have actually created a lot of opportunities for us. We're coming in maybe third in the game, maybe fourth in the game as opposed to first. And we're getting some opportunities that they have, I suppose, I don't know what the right word is, but probably not met their requirements as well as they would have hoped to have done. And we're picking up the slack there. Likewise, in the US, we've identified that if we want to do business in America, we have to be US made. And that's why we're coming to Riverside. At the moment, with the demise of Ollie, there is no US made shuttle supplier in the US. We will be the only one. So we think that will open up huge opportunities for us. But you know, it's almost a day-to-day proposition when you're in this game in terms of where you go the next day.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rosabelle, did you want to go next, or?
Well, just real quick, and maybe a little bit following up, Dean, with the question from Scott, which is, we're very excited to have the opportunity here in Riverside to work with you and the city to bring Ohmio and build their manufacturing headquarters here in Riverside. Can you talk about two things? Because always it's about opportunity, right? And what can bringing Ohmio, what will it do for the region? So I'd like to hear from you, and for particular our students, right? How the impact of having Ohmio here in Riverside being manufactured will impact our region and also its future as a player in autonomous vehicles.
Oh yeah, of course. Thank you, Rosabelle. Well, obviously coming to Riverside isn't just that. There's obviously a manufacturing facility that we need to open, but we also have to employ people. One of our biggest problems at the moment is that we've got deployments in many parts of Europe, a bit of Asia, and a little bit in America, and we're having to send people from Australia and New Zealand quite regularly to help out with the deployments going on there, and it's very costly. In Riverside, our intent would be to build up a US team. So Zane, who I showed you in one of our pictures, is our business development director. I'm the president of US, but we will be employing technicians, we'll be employing systems engineers, electronic engineers, electrical engineers, not so many mechanical engineers anymore because they're very smart vehicles, these, as opposed to the vehicles that were being built, 20, 30, 40, 50 or 100 years ago. So the impact on the student population, because we're developing and manufacturing high-tech, new tech, will be immediate. The flow-on effect of us manufacturing our vehicles there will potentially identify other manufacturers to come to Riverside or California as well, suppliers of different components. We spoke about LiDARs, cameras, engines, electric motors, batteries, etc. We believe that by being the manufacturer of the end product, the add-ons that go into the end product will gravitate to the region as well. And then obviously the flow-on effect of us being there will be the deployment and manufacturing of these vehicles throughout the United States. We're working on a project that Rosabelle knows about, the Ontario International Airport project. Not sure whether many of you know about that one, but they're talking about building a tunnel between the nearby train stations of the terminals at Ontario Airport. There's about a $500 million grant available to San Bernardino County. So it'd be a tunnel, and they want to run autonomous shuttles in there. We're one of, I think, 2 or 3 maximum shuttle manufacturers that have been pre-qualified to be part of the bid. So the fact that we'll be in Riverside certainly puts us in good stead to be in pole position, I think, to be successful in that project. And then there are many, many more other projects throughout the United States that we're working on as we speak.
Thank you. Chan, did you have a quick question for our speaker?
Yes, I do. Hi, Chan again. Just since you're expanding your market into the United States and choosing Riverside to be a place where you start and manufacturing, want to hear more about what other project or plan or like expansion that you're planning to do in, like, what city do you planning to expand into in the future for your company?
Okay, thank you, Chan. I'll just turn my video off. I'm going to reconnect to some power, but I'll still talk. You can hear me, I'm sure. Look, first step right now in 2 weeks' time is we want to sign off on our manufacturing deal in Riverside, which would be a huge step forward for us. At the moment, as I mentioned, all of our manufacturing up until now has been done in China. And as we all know, China is an issue for all of us, both from a geopolitical point of view and also an availability of goods point of view. So America is where we want to be, and that's what we want to be doing in America, manufacturing. I think it's a little bit early to be saying where else might you manufacture, but our intent is to manufacture for all of the US market and probably for the rest of the world as well. I'll give you an example of one project that we're in line for, and that's in Florida, in Jacksonville. They've been talking now for a number of years. Again, they've got a lot of funding from the US government to replace their 30 or 40-year-old Skyway which is effectively a monorail, with autonomous vehicles that can then go down to ground level and service the street level as well. We're heavily involved in bidding for that project. And as I said, the Ontario project and other projects in Northern California and other projects in other parts like Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. In the short to medium term, we will be operating out of Riverside. If we happen to grow to the point where more and more vehicles are required, we don't necessarily have to open another manufacturing place in another state. We just need a bigger plant. At the moment, we're looking at a 20 to 30,000 square foot facility. If my owner had his way, he'd be going for 50 to 70,000 square foot. But I'm saying to him, slow down. Let's walk before we run. And that's effectively what I'm saying to you. We're walking right now. We'll start running maybe in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Excuse me. Thank you for your time. And yeah.
Roz, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. Real briefly, firstly, I would say I think this kind of service is sorely needed in Riverside. There's no public transportation to speak of from where I'm from in LA. You can travel around in LA, but to get out of that area, it's difficult. And I'll also say I'm happy for anyone who's going to give Elon Musk a run for his money in terms of self-driving. In terms of design, though, when you were talking about how there was some confusion about during assembly, the front and the back, I can kind of see that. Now, I know it would be entirely cosmetic, but why not have just a slight overhang in the front just to guide the eye? I know it's not critical to know which way is the front, I guess, because no driver has to get in, but just curious.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question because originally when we started manufacturing the vehicles, and likewise our competitors, if you look at the Navia vehicle or the Easy Mile vehicle, they were all built with a view to being exactly the same and at the front and the back, because there was a thought that the vehicle had to be bi-directional, right? That the vehicle could run in a forward manner and then all of a sudden switch it into reverse and it goes in the opposite direction. So there was no real front and back, because what is the front and the back? They're both the same. When we delivered the vehicles to Korea, they said, yeah, they're fine. We don't want them to operate bi-directionally. We only want them to run in a straightforward direction. So therefore, we need to know which end is the front and which end is the back. And so that's what we did with them. That same requirement hasn't been the requirement in Europe, for instance. But in the fullness of time, what we might do is, we can play around with the look of the shell, as you said. We're not wedded to that being our only design. In fact, one of our, I suppose, competitors / collaborators, who is working on a project, the same project in Florida, has sort of said, look, your vehicle looks great, but maybe we need to make it look even more, 22nd century type thing. So, you know what vehicles look like. The BMWs that we have today or the Mercedes that we have today don't look like what they did 20 years ago. That will evolve. We'll change the look of the vehicle in time, of course.
Thank you. That was actually a really interesting answer because I didn't know it was to be bidirectional, but I had to think. I was wondering because it looked like it could almost swap, but then I was wondering if it was based on physics, but then I'm like, I don't know that a box is a great shape, but a friend told me I had missed the first minute. She said that it was designed to maximize space for people standing, and that made sense too, but it's all very interesting. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Well, class, I think Dean has answered all comers. You all asked so many great questions that the questions I was going to ask him have been answered, sometimes multiple times. So I think tonight's class was about competition, direct competitors and indirect competitors. And Dean provided us a wealth of information about how they weigh that into their decision and how their operation is based on, having competitive advantages. And then for next week, we're talking about a commercialization plan. And a couple of you asked good questions about, how do you determine what's next and what's next for your company. So, Dean, you don't have any more questions to answer from me. You did a great job of covering them all. This was awesome. You can tell by the amount of participation that people are really interested in what you're doing. And not only the subject that we have, but you and Ohmio. So thank you very much for giving us so much of your time today, tomorrow, for us.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you, Jay.
Let's give Dean a thumbs up with our reactions.
Thank you.
And a good day.
Thanks for participating, and I hope to see you all soon. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Dean.
Bye.
Thanks, Dean.
Bye.
Au revoir. Okay, so we are ready now to go. That was really nice. We're ready to go into our breakout sessions, and